Yay, we are live. Hello, everyone. Go ahead and come on in here. I'm going to give you a second to come on in. Please go ahead and like and share so we can get this information out to people who need to see it. Super excited to have my guest on again. So I'm going to give everyone a second to pop on before we get started. We don't want you to miss anything. Let me know if you can hear us. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Hey, from Alaska. Yay, that's awesome. We'd love to come visit. Let us to Alaska. Okay, that would be awesome. Yeah, you guys, hey, it's Lisa Alexander, founder and executive director of Stand Up Survivor. I have licensed clinical social worker, Katie Gillis. Hey, Katie.
Hey.
Hi, welcome back. I love a good second guest. I'm so excited to have you back. Hey, you guys, come on and let us know where you are tuning in from. So Katie is a second-time guest, and she has been with us before. So if you have not seen her before, please make sure you go back in our video archives and check it out. We talked about domestic violence in the LGBTQIA community. She's a licensed clinical social worker. She's an author. She's a counselor. She's amazing. So I'm definitely excited that you are tuning in with us tonight. Hey, Rebecca. Hey, Elizabeth. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Michelle. So tonight we're talking about, Katie, a topic that's pretty heavy, right? And pretty sensitive and pretty hits home to a lot of us as survivors, and I'm sure a lot of the clients that you work with as well. So let's just dive on in. You guys, tonight we're talking about domestic violence and the legal systems and the way that it affects survivors and learning how to navigate the legal system. Actually, you know what? Hello, can you pull up your book real quick? Because Katie's an author, and I think that's literally like what it says. What is your book?
It is Invisible Bruises. It is how a better understanding of the patterns of domestic violence can help survivors navigate the legal system. Oh, yes. I mean, helps if I hold it up.
Awesome. And we're going to put the link in there so that you can purchase it. It is so good, chock full of information. Katie has done her research, and we want to make sure that we're able to help you out tonight. So make sure you let somebody know that we're on and that you share it with them. So Katie, let's get started. You know, when we put this topic out, everyone is like, oh my goodness, you know, the legal system. Mm-hmm. We always throw out that the legal system wasn't there for us. Our restraining orders weren't accepted. There's so many issues. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, as survivors of abuse, how do we navigate this legal system?
So the number one thing I always want to tell people, you know, the number one question I get from friends, family, clients, coworkers, colleagues is, does a protection order really work? And it's always phrased just like that. Does it really work? Do those things really work? I mean, it's just a piece of paper. That's the number one thing I hear. And I always say to the people, you know what? Yes and no. It starts the process of a paper trail. And that, for many, can mean the difference between protection and not protection.
Okay. So first of all, I'm going to stop you right there real quick. You know how we do kind of go back and forth, but the paper trail is really important because I think one of the questions survivors tell us they get asked all the time, well, did you make a file? Did you file a police report? Did you call the police? Did you make a report? Right. And then most of the times, no, I didn't. I didn't want to call the cops. You know, I was afraid. Right. Yeah. But you made a key point, the paper trail. The paper trail. So I'm a big advocate of calling the police, of making the report, of following through with the protection order.
And many do not know this, that you can actually call the police and you can make a report without pressing charges. So there are many who are in that, like, I don't know what to do stage. I'm not sure if I'm going to leave yet. Or maybe you have left, but you're scared. And that's okay. Make the report. Don't press charges if you don't want to, but there's a report. You know, if the person came out and vandalized your home, there are pictures, there's a report, it's time-stamped. That's the biggest thing. And then when you need to, you can go in and say, okay, here are the things that have happened to me. It is best to give the person's name and then say, I'd like to not press charges. That does help. However, I always like to give a disclaimer, you know, I cannot give any kind of legal advice. I can't tell you what can and can't happen from that. But in my experience of working with survivors, that is something the road that many choose to take if they're not really sure, you know, how they're going to go and if they're going to be able to get a protection order.
I love that you said that too, because we often think, well, it has to come to a head, right? A serious event before we make a report. And that's not true.
No.
Having a paper trail, you're looking
Yeah.
at someone who regrets not having
Yeah.
a paper trail, right? Have
Yeah.
a paper trail. Even if you're not ready to press charges, make a report. Go in
Yes.
and talk to someone. Let them know that something is going on, right?
Yeah.
And so oftentimes we work with survivors, Katie, who are still in the relationship, still
Mhm. Yes.
file the order. Please, so someone needs to know what you're going through, right? And that's really, really important. So I see a lot of comments, and we're going to get to the, you know, them still coming around with the no contact orders and our feelings about police and stuff like that, because they're valid feelings, you know, as
Yeah,
survivors,
absolutely.
they're valid feelings. But we want to try to push back some of what we feel and try to navigate how we can get the support that we need through the legal system. Okay, so I want to touch on a really why so many survivors don't report the abuse.
Mm-hmm. So the number one thing I hear that people tell me is, you know, I'm scared. I'm scared to report. I'm scared it's going to escalate. And because the fact is that many times it does. The many times a protection order will escalate any kind of violence. It will escalate any kind of abuse, any kind of harassment. And, you know, most of us, you know, I say average people, if we get a protection order served against us, most of us are going to say, oh, no, I'm not going to have anything to do with that person or any of their affiliates or anything. Most of us will walk the other way.
Yeah, the protection order. Right.
We don't want to be involved. We don't want to deal with, you know, the law, anything like that. However, there's a small percentage of our population that thinks either they're above the law, they don't care either way. Those are the people who creating a paper trail against is definitely very important, because you end up in a situation where you're faced with, it's your word against theirs. It's he said, she said.
And the truth of the matter is, I really like that you said that. They're afraid that if I put in a protection order, the abuse is going to escalate. So I just want to go back, right? Because this is, you are experiencing this, you know what you're talking about, and we can both sit here and say the abuse is going to escalate anyway, right? Yeah. Let's just put that out there. The abuse is going to escalate anyway. So why not have that piece of paper? And I understand when people say it's just a piece of paper, but a paper trail that protects you. It's really, really important that I understand that you feel like, well, I'm afraid of what they're going to do. Warranted. And Katie, thank you so much for saying that, because they need to know that you're right. It may escalate, but also know that it may still escalate.
It will escalate anyway.
It'll escalate anyway.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that many will say to me, well, I fear retaliation. I fear retaliation. And I will say to them, you're already being retaliated against for whatever it is that you've done. You've left the relationship. You've outed them.
Yeah. And that's one of the things abusers don't like, especially narcissistic abusers. Yes. They don't want to be outed. You cannot rip the Band-Aid off. You cannot take off their mask. You cannot let people see who they actually are. And that piece of paper that does that. That's speaking to the court, speaking to police officers, that does that, right?
Yep.
And I saw in some of the comments, Katie, they're saying fear is a reason, shame is another reason. And so let's tackle some of those reasons real quick. So fear, I think, ties in with the fear of that the abuse is going to continue, right? Yes. Is that what you see fear as well?
Absolutely, because a lot of times, you know, what ends up happening is that the abuse then takes on, you know, the authorities get involved, and that's how it ends up perpetuating the system, because I can no longer come to your house and bang down your door and attack you because of this piece of paper. You know, I'm not that dumb. However, I can call the dean of your university. I can call DCFS and report you for child abuse. And they have to investigate. And then those become the new weapons that they take on. And so many people, you know, will sit in my office, or, you know, or friends, family call me on the phone and they're saying, you know, Katie, like I'd rather go back to the assaults, because the assaults I can handle. Threat against my children, threats against my livelihood, threats against my home, that I can't handle. There's no guideline for how to handle that one.
That's really hard. You know, as an advocate, that's one of the hardest things that I think that we deal with, is hearing someone say that I would rather go back to the abuse, because we know what you're going back to. And we also know what you're going back to. We also know that if you found the strength to leave and then you decide to go back, we know that the abuse is going to continue or escalate.
Oh, it gets worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so
how dare you leave?
How dare you leave? Who do you think you are? You know? And so I understand completely when people say, you know, I'd rather go back. I know what the assaults look like at home. I know what I'm going to deal with at home. It's outside that I don't know about, you know, yet and still, We're always going to tell you to get to safety.
Yeah, the dysfunction that you know is always better than the dysfunction that you haven't yet seen. And we know this. I mean, I'm a social worker. I work, with DCFS closely, and we know this. We know that when children come in and they say, "Mommy or Daddy has hurt me," and they're reported and they're not taken out of the home, they know when those social workers leave, they're going to get it. And it's the same is true for adults. They know I've called the police. The police come out. If they do not do something, I'm going to get it when the police leave. And so many will say, it's easier to just not, it's easier to, I can handle them myself, as usually.
Yeah. And I think we have, as survivors, have trained ourselves to deal with them. You know, no one should have to navigate abuse, right? No one should have to figure out how to live in an abusive situation, how to protect your children, how to stay alive or survive in an abusive situation. Yes. But having been in it, you figure out how to survive and how to live. But it's not normal. It's not the normal way we were created to live. And so that's a really, really hard thing to go through. And so we're always going to tell you, I know you may feel like you want to go back because you know what hell looks like back there. Right. But we want to do our best to make sure that you get to safety. So I'm going to share a specific story. People are hating. They don't really like the police. I see y'all comments, right?
Yeah, I see all those comments.
I know they're not happy with police. But so I remember in my first marriage, my abusive marriage, my ex-husband was being abusive. And so I called the police. I was terrified. My daughter was just born. She was really little. I called the police. I'm hysterical, just a mess. He's calm, cool, and collected. You know what this looks like.
Of course.
And the police officer says to me, he goes, "If you call us again, we're going to take your child." And I thought, well, guess what? I'm going to close the door and stay where I am with my abuser. I'm not calling you again because I'm not giving you the chance to take my child. No, I would rather stay in the abuse than you take my child.
Protect my child. Yeah,
absolutely. And so for me, that was I've never called them again, right? No, that was a really, really hard decision and moment for me. But I thought to myself, I can't lose my child, and a lot of our survivors are faced with that same situation, and somebody talked about training the police officers in understanding what domestic violence actually is.
And that's a hard one, because and I talk about this a lot in my book, that the police, the law enforcement, they really are faced with kind of a lose-lose situation. I mean, me as a trained clinician, I mean, they're clinicians that have been in the field twice as long as me, and we all get fooled every day. I mean, and we have many years of training. And it's hard because you're dealing with humans. You're dealing with human interaction, human dynamic, and you show up to a scene. How do you know who's telling the truth? And in the news right now with Gabby Petito, we just saw that, it's now coming to light that the boyfriend, that they responded to a domestic violence altercation and the boyfriend was cool, calm, collected. Oh no, and she's a mess. And so they assume that she's the one.
And that's the dynamic of the power and the control situation, because it happened to us. We're carrying the emotion of what just occurred, and they're like, "See, I told you she was crazy. Look how she acts. I was just trying to calm her down." I was just trying to calm her down. As you can see, how she is, And so the police are like, "Okay, well, just kind of, you guys need time apart," not realizing that you're looking at a victim of abuse, and that's really, really hard. Someone said in the comments that their abuser, since they left, has called Child Protective Services on them multiple times, and we hear that all the time.
So common. I work with people who've been reported to the Bar Association just because they had the audacity to end a relationship. CPS, CPS, DCFS, we call it here in Louisiana, all the time involved. I mean, and the thing is that the fact of the matter is that they have to respond because when you're dealing with a vulnerable population like children, or the elderly or anything like that, you cannot just say, "Oh, this person seems angry." You have to follow up, and it becomes and they know that, perpetrators know that. And so then that becomes their new weapon.
Yeah. And they use it. I mean, they use it. They use it. And it's so hard because, as a survivor with children, you're like, okay, well, I might as well go back. How many times are they going to come to my job? How many times are they going to tell me there's a report on my children? And I used to work with, with families whose children were taken away and, violence, in-home violence threatens children and all this kind of stuff. And children were removed from homes where they really shouldn't have been. Like there was abuse in the home, and really what needed to happen was the parent that was the victim, survivor, needed the help as well as those children. Not for those children to be taken out of the care of the non-abusive parent. And that happens so often. It is such an unfair thing to witness in the judicial system. And like you said, I get that they have a difficult decision to make, but that's why it's so important to have trained domestic violence advocates in all of these situations so that you can know what that looks like, because children are being pulled out of homes and even placed in homes with the abuser, you know, instead of with the non-abusive parent. And I hear this all the time, and I'm sure that you do too. And so survivors will say, well, I might as well just stay with my abuser because
so I can at least be with my children.
I can at least, you took the words out of my mouth. I can believe with my children.
I can protect my children better than no other, you know. Yeah, they're going to stay with their children, you know. And I always kind of follow it up with this, like, you know, the police, you know, they don't have an easy job, you know, they don't. I get that there's a lot of, you know, stuff going on. They don't have an easy job. And the fact is that they're not, just as I am not a trained law enforcement officer. I cannot make a decision of what is illegal versus not.
Right.
From my training. And I think the same goes true for them. They can't make a decision, you know, of when they show up, they don't know. Are they seeing a mental health crisis? Are they seeing a domestic violence incident? Are they seeing substance use? Are they seeing all of that? You know, so it's just
that's a really good point. And, you know, and to that point, I will say again, it's so important that if they feel it's a domestic call, have someone available on the phone, in person, to go with them, so they would be able to assess effectively, right? I just feel like,
I feel like any aid that we can give to any, you know, policeman or social services, like, how could that ever hurt to add support for them? You know, free them up to deal with other stuff. You know, and if they have someone else that can go out with them, you know, someone who's on call, who's trained to deal with that kind of stuff. And
it's necessary. I love Melanie said that she used to ride along with a local PD as a DV advocate and can interact. That's so important. And I know it may seem excessive, but as survivors, knowing that someone is there that can empathize and understand what they're going through in that moment of crisis, it can be life-changing and life-saving for them.
Because there's the initial point of contact, which is when the cop, you know, first shows up at your door. That's the initial point of contact. That's just when it starts. You're then following up at the courthouse if there are any charges that need to be made. You're then following up if you need to do a protection order. You're then making appearance at court. You know, depending on the state or the situation, sometimes those policemen the police people are then subpoenaed. And so, you know, that's just the initial point of contact. Then there needs to be a chain. There needs to be multiple points of contact of being able to show survivors, show victims, this is what you do. This is how you navigate.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that, because you can't just say, well, go down to the courthouse and get a protection order. Well,
which is what they do. That's what they do. They say, go.
That blows my mind. Yeah. What does that even mean to a victim in crisis? What does that mean? That is so confusing. And I know you talk about that in your book, Katie. One of the reasons I love it so much, because it's so detailed. What do you mean? Go to the court and get a protection order. So let's talk about that process. You talk about it a little bit in your book about a situation that you were explaining about someone who went and got a protection order and some of the challenges they went through.
And so, and again, I always want to preface this is state specific. I don't know, it might be different in other states other than Louisiana, but here you go to the court and you get what's called a temporary protection order, and that lasts anywhere from 7 to 14 days in this state, in many states. During that time, it's just a temporary order. So what happens then is the perpetrator has to be served. And many people don't know that. Many people walk out of that courthouse thinking, oh, I just had this signed at 2:33. I'm protected from 2:33 p.m. today. No, you're not. Because if they evade service, it's like it was never signed.
Wow.
Yeah, they have to be served. So if they're not served until, 5:53, whatever they did in those 3 hours, doesn't matter.
Wow. And you talk about that a lot in your book. So we're going to put the information up for you guys to grab the book at the end. But it's really important to recognize how you can navigate the legal system. So let's talk about something else really quickly. So people want to know if protection orders really work. So let's dig into that real quick. Like you do in your book a lot, but do they really work? Now let's just put a disclaimer out there. Go ahead. You want to get one anyway?
I always say this, get one anyway. Get one
Absolutely.
anyway. Because again, it creates that paper trail. And it will always be something that you can at least say, I tried, because there is a lot of victim blaming in the legal system, and a lot of the victim blaming in society. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you get a protection order? Why didn't you file charges? It's always why didn't you? Why didn't you? Why didn't you? Just get the protection order. It creates a paper trail, and it does cause protection. Kind of like I was saying earlier, most of us, law-abiding citizens, most people will get a protection order served to them and be like, whoa, okay, yeah, I don't want anything to do with this person. Yeah. I won't open any of their mail. I won't answer any phone calls, for them. Most of us are like that. The ones that don't take that, those are the ones that it wouldn't have worked anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm one of those people, Katie, who put in for the protection order, and when it's time to go back to court, I didn't go. I was so scared.
Yes, and it's so common.
Oh yeah, and I loved him so much, and I thought he was going to change, right? And you're sitting here looking at someone who absolutely regrets doing that, because abusers continue to abuse, right? Yeah. And whether it's you or someone else, they're going to continue to abuse. Having that paper trail, having that documentation would have probably protected me a lot sooner, I think, and the women that came behind me. So that's really, really important. I'm gonna just intercept real quick because these comments are going really fast.
No, I'm trying to
I know about the emotional and mental abuse. So let's just talk about the fact that getting a protection order for mental and emotional abuse, I know in many states, is not an option, right?
Well, I just saw the comment, why is emotional? I think it's Ghislaine, that's a very pretty name.
Yeah.
Why the emotional and mental abuse not considered as much as physical abuse? And the fact of the matter really is that, and again, I'm not a legal professional, but many have explained it to me, is that it's just, the law is really black and white. The law is, assault, you can prove it happened or it did not happen. It's not subjective, it's objective. And emotional abuse, harassment, stalking, they're all things that fall under the rights of the perpetrator. The perpetrator has, unfortunately, the right to slander you. They have the right to happen to be in the same parking lot as you multiple times that day. It's harder to prove. I've had many law officers say to me, look, I don't know what to do. He was, he has the right to drive on a public street, or they have the right to be in Walmart at the same time as your client. I mean, it happens all the time. Because it is harder to prove in their defense.
And it's just unfair. It needs to change. I'm going to say it again, and it needs to change. Psychological abuse, mental abuse, it needs to change. And it's so difficult. They're not able to prove that in order to get a protection order, and they still need one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can drive on your street. Yeah, they can, be in the store with you. You have perfect examples in your book where you talk about how often people are followed and harassed and slandered.
Yes.
And it's allowed.
It's freedom of speech. I mean, I had a friend who, her ex-husband built an entire website about her and put all of her personal business on this website. Wow. And my thing is like, how is that not the new revenge porn?
Right.
Putting someone's personal business on a website should be the new revenge porn. They should be held accountable for that.
They should be held accountable for that. Tanya, I love that she goes, coercive control is being recognized more in the laws in a few places in California. So that's really good. So what would you tell us someone who is experiencing emotional and psychological abuse, harassment, but they have been denied over and over a protection order?
Yeah, that's my number one thing I'm always going to say. And of course, this is, the mental health background that I have. I'm always going to say, make sure you have support, because this is something where you can end up making yourself feel like, am I the one that's crazy? Why is no one believing me? And so make sure you have support, whether that is your family, whether it's a therapist, whether it's all of the above. Make sure that you have support in the situation. The number two thing I always tell people is to jot things down. Have a journal. Have just something sitting just right next to you. Jot down the date and time that it happened. Yes. Screenshots, anything like that. I've seen many situations in a court of law where just scribbles on a journal was able to get someone a protection order because they were able to go up there and say affirmatively, this happened in this time, instead of, well, it was recent and you have more concrete evidence and you have a more concrete way of describing what happened. Right. So I always tell people, document, get support. The other things that I say, and these are huge, I developed a method called I call it the NEB method, which is funny. I have a friend named Neb back home, and he's like, you had to name it after me. It's the acronym. It's NEB, necessary, emotional, and brief. And I tell people that you have to adapt that with the person. Is the conversation necessary? Is the contact necessary?
Okay, so you're talking about when a survivor is communicating with the abuser.
Or any time that you're dealing, you have to deal with them at all. Yeah.
Okay.
Anytime or anything, any of their affiliates, anything like that.
Okay, so what is it again?
It's necessary. So N is necessary. E is emotionless. B is brief.
Okay. And is it necessary for you to communicate? Everything that they message or send to you or text you or email you is not necessary. Right? You do not have to respond.
Yep, you do not have to respond. If they message, I saw you at Walmart with your friend, you don't have to respond.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And this is a part of your boundary setting. This is a part of taking control back of your life. Is it necessary? NEB, great. Lisa said NEB is great. Awesome. Necessary. Is it necessary? And I promise you, most of the time that they're communicating with you is to agitate you, to entice you, to engage you.
Yes.
It's not necessary.
Not necessary. Now, if it's okay, I need you to pick up, our child, little Emily, at 4, that's necessary.
Absolutely. And a simple okay would suffice.
Yeah. Right. And then it goes into the second one.
Emotionless.
Okay. So we've determined that it's necessary. So then we slip into the second one. Is an emotionless. Don't put any emotion. Don't convey any type of anger, any type of fear, agitation, frustration. Just, I'll be there at 4.
That's it.
Brief. Motionless and brief.
Emotionless and brief.
Go into it.
But as victim survivors of abuse, we find ourselves over explaining and wanting to add a little, have a good day or hope you're doing good, just whatever out of fear or habit, and we're encouraging. Right.
And many times, and a lot of times, like women, we are conditioned to be like this. We are conditioned to kind of soften the blow. Women are conditioned and socialized in our society not to be assertive. And so it is part of our nature to not be like, I'll see you at 4. That's considered cold. It's considered, aggressive for us usually. So a lot of times, I have to work with people and say, we're going to have to work on those boundaries, where, you don't have to say anything else. It doesn't matter. And the second thing I wanted to mention too, I feel like I didn't fully answer. Yeah. Someone just mentioned the gray rock. And that's exactly where I was going.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yes. So I cannot take any credit for gray rock, but that is it. I can explain that if you want me.
But what is the B part?
Oh, the B is brief.
Brief. Keep it brief.
Keep it brief. Emotionless and brief. Like I'll be there at 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do an example real quick because I'm hands on like that. So your abuser texts you and say, hey, I saw you at Walmart today. Who was that person that you were with, and why were the kids talking to him?
My advice for that one, I wouldn't respond, because there's nothing you can say that is going to get them. It's not going to be a productive conversation.
No.
It's not going to be a productive.
I love it. We're not answering that one, right? Okay, so I need you to pick up the kids at 3:00. Actually, I need you to pick up the kids at 3:00. I can't take them this weekend.
That's a hard one because it gets into, it depends on your child, your custody and stuff like that. If you have, first right of refusal, or if you have, in your custody that you could do that and you want to do that, I'll see you at 3 at the pickup location, wherever that is, Cracker Barrel. I'll see you at 3 at Cracker Barrel.
That's it.
Yeah.
Brief, necessary.
Yeah.
Emotionless.
Yeah.
Yes. And if you want to touch on gray rock, if you'd like to, you can real quick. You want to
so gray rock, I can't take any credit for gray rock, but gray rock is essentially you want to be as boring as a gray rock, because that's really the only way to not escalate them. Mm-hmm. You just want to be as boring and as inconspicuous as a gray rock. And that's y'all can Google that. That's a very widely
common, And I mean, they want to antagonize you. They want to pull your emotions. Yeah. They want to get you involved in an up and down roller coaster. And I want to encourage you: don't go on the ride with them. Mm-hmm. You're taking control. You're setting your boundaries, and you're taking control of your own personal emotions. as all over the places they may be after leaving, that's one thing that you can begin to control is the way that they're allowed to talk to you and the way that you respond back.
Yes.
That's really important. Yes, we do, Lisa. We consider their feelings and they don't consider ours. Yes. So screenshot it. Katie was saying screenshot it. Get those emails, print them out, and keep a record of everything. Keep a record of all of these paperwork. Yes. All right. Let's see. Let's talk about protection orders being denied and how frustrating that can be for a survivor of abuse, because what happens when it's denied? What do I do?
Oh, that's the worst. And then, and that usually fuels the perpetrator. It fuels them because then they feel vindicated and they feel, oh yes, justice is served. And, and they'll go out and escalate it. And then they know exactly what I was doing before. It's fine. I can do those same things and I can continue to get away with it. That's so hard.
It's really hard.
And I talk a lot about this in my book about like weighing the options. Like, do you want to get a lawyer? Do you not? Getting an advocate, things that can help you, even just filing paperwork the wrong way, little things like that can get you denied.
And it's important that you still take notes even if your protection order was denied. Do exactly what she talked about. Still keep a record. Don't give up. Don't say, well, you know what, the system's not protecting me. Forget it. I'll just go back. Yeah. We don't want you to put yourself back in danger, and I understand that it is hard. I understand that it feels defeating. And I know you talk about in your book how, going to the courthouse, oh, the paperwork's wrong, come back another time. Oh, we're not open, come back another time. Oh, all these situations and challenges that you run into. So we're huge on making sure that you have an advocate to journey with you through this so that you're not by yourself, who understands stuff a little bit more than you do and maybe knows some people that they can connect with so that you're not alone.
Because you'll get denied for little things like, not having your ID, not having the correct ID. You also, this is another thing a lot of victims don't know. When you show up to get your protection order, you have to have their current legal address. And so if it's a relationship that has ended, or if it's someone who's couch hopping, and you don't have their address, that is essentially, at least in Louisiana, that they'll say, well, we don't really know what to do.
Oh my goodness, that's terrible.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes they can serve at
how are you supposed to know their address in the first place?
Exactly.
I mean, that's crazy. What it does is it puts more pressure on you to just try to get to be safe, right? You're not asking for much. You're just asking to be safe, to protect yourself and your children. Yet you have all these hoops that you have to go through. And I can understand, as a survivor of abuse, you don't want to go through that. You might as well just lay down and say, you know what, don't worry about it. But I want to encourage you, Katie's here to tell you, you are worth fighting for, right? Your safety, your sanity is worth fighting for. We don't want you to give up just because of these challenges that you're going to run into. And we already know that the justice system is not fair. They do not understand domestic violence the way that they should. There's a lot of loopholes. There's a lot of gaps, right, Katie? But don't give up.
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many gaps because a lot of it is just, it falls under freedom of speech. It falls under, they have the right to, as long as they're doing it in good faith, they have a right to make a report to DCFS. They have a right to make a report to your licensing board, to your job, anything like that. And so they are allowed to really kind of skirt the system that way. And I always say, this hurts perpetrators too, because these people are not held accountable and then they don't get the help that they need.
Correct. And the perpetrators, they're not going to jail. They're not being held accountable that way. I remember when I was in the judge's chambers, getting my divorce, and I was telling the judge, I'm like, Your Honor, I want him to get some kind of help. Batterers Intervention is a program we have here in Florida. I'm like, please, because no matter who he's with, he's going to be abusive. Yes. And my children, you're telling me that my children have to go with him how many days a week, right? Mm-hmm. And I have to share custody with him. You're making me, regardless of the pictures I've shown you, regardless of the abuse I've explained to you, you're telling me they still have to go to him. And I'm telling you that he's going to continue to abuse whoever he's with. And the judge looked at me and said, so what do you want me to do about it?
And they've said that to me too. And they've said, no, this should be enough. The protection order should be enough. And I always say, with all due respect, Your Honor, this is kind of my area more than yours. And they still,
still find ways to abuse. And let me just tell you, walking out of that courtroom, he was ordered to do batterers intervention, right? And I've been divorced, I don't know, 11 years now, 12 years. Not one day of batterers intervention. He's walked to the court and gave the judge the finger, told the judge, kiss it, I'm not doing it. And it's still abusive. So it didn't matter, but it was I had to try to protect my children. And so it's hard to watch something like that happen and feel so helpless, right?
Oh, yeah.
But my encouragement is always going to be to continue, and to not give up. So one more thing really quickly, I want to talk a little bit about the legal system perpetuating the cycle of abuse. What do you mean by that? Can you explain that a little bit?
So what I mean by that is that what ends up happening is, then they realize, okay, I need to up the ante here, because I can no longer pull up beside this woman's house, or follow this man to work, but so what I'm going to do is I'm going to up the ante. I'm going to report them for child abuse. I'm going to call their job. And then what ends up happening is that they end up involving the legal system, involving the authorities in the abuse. And the legal system itself takes on the role of the perpetrator. So the perpetrator themselves is no longer even relevant to the abuse.
Wow.
Because you're getting the phone calls from DCFS. You're getting, your licensing board, the bar association is coming after you and investigating you. Your employer is pulling you aside and saying, hey, I've been getting these phone calls saying you're stealing money, whatever. It's endless, and it's all under freedom of speech. People have the right to make complaints if they're concerned. And so it ends up being that the perpetrator themselves is no longer even relevant, because they have a stand-in. They have someone to do their dirty work for them.
Wow. And it's interesting you say that, because that is profound, Miriam. That is very profound what you're saying. And the thing is, do they even know they're being used in such a way? And so as a victim, you're now you're fighting for your own basic rights.
Yes.
Yes.
And many of them do. I mean, I've worked with people who work for the bar association. I've worked with people who work for licensing boards for nurses and doctors, and and they can say, look, you can tell usually if someone's putting in a complaint, you can tell that they're angry versus someone who's concerned. DCFS, they can usually tell that there's some kind of thing going on. However, because these boards regulate protected populations, patients, children, elderly, clients, these are all protected populations. The boards have to investigate that. They can't say, oh, well, this person's clearly angry, I'm not going to investigate it. Because then what if that's the one time?
Wow. Mm-hmm. And that's just so hard.
It's horrible.
You fought to get out, and you still have to continue to fight,
And you fought so hard to get your license and develop your career, and then you have someone go after it.
Sabotage it, just like that. Just by a phone call, by a letter, by reporting something that's false. And now
they don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you're fighting for your job. You're fighting for your family. Calling your family and telling your family lies about you. Calling your mother, saying things about you that aren't true, right?
They start to take on, when they start to take on the authorities, the legal system is the new stand-in, and then your family, your social circle, your coworkers, they become the new stand-in as well. Anyone who takes time to listen and anyone who believes the person is becoming the new stand-in for the abuse as well, and helping to perpetuate it. Anytime you feel like you have to tell your story, anytime you feel like you have to convince someone, or anytime you feel like you're having to defend yourself, that is a situation where it is being perpetuated through that.
And that's just exhausting for the survivor. You fight in the relationship to survive, and you're fighting outside of the relationship to survive. Someone mentioned anger management, and so I always want to emphasize domestic violence is not an anger management issue. Domestic violence is a personal issue that needs better intervention. Or statistically on the amount of survivors, abusers that actually change is very, very small.
Very slim, yeah.
Yeah, it's very slim, and that's a very, very small percentage. And so waiting and hoping that they'll change versus saving your life and the life of your children, that's got to be it. And to know and understand that you don't deserve to experience that abuse. So tell me a little bit about, can you hold your book up one more time really quickly? And I kind of want to ask you, what are some key points when you talk about your book? I'm going to put it up here in the comments real quickly.
It's hard to get the angle correct. There we go.
Okay, Invisible Bruises. Yeah, so this is a really important book, and I really think that counselors need to read it, attorneys need to read it, survivors need to read it, and it really does help you learn how to navigate the legal system. And you give a lot of great examples, and you have a great resource guide in the back as well, and that's really, really important. So if you have survivors that are watching today, right, and they're experiencing abuse, they're experiencing the re-traumatization from the legal system, what would you tell them? What would you say to them?
I would say that, the number one thing I always tell people is have a support system, because there's going to be days where maybe you have a screenshot sent to you from a mutual friend, or maybe you hear through the grapevine that something happened. Maybe you come home and there's a letter from your licensing board in the mailbox again. To have a support system, have that person, almost like, we call it sometimes almost like a co-sponsor, have your sponsor, have someone who you can call and say, they're doing it again. And have someone that you can really vent to.
Yeah, I just want to say that that's really, really important, because in the moments when you're feeling the weakest and you're feeling really alone, it's really important that you have that person.
Yes.
Lisa, you need to inbox us. You have been a part of the Stand Up Survivor community for a long time. And if you don't have that support system, we'd love to help provide that for you. Tanya is asking how to connect with Katie. I am going to put her website up on, actually, I can put it up. Oh, it's up there now. That's how you can connect with Katie. That's also, where you can put the link later about where to get her book as well. So Caitlin Gillis, LCSW, that's how you can get in contact with her. Yes, Jess said Facebook has a lot of domestic violence support groups that are very good. That's important. Everyone needs a support system. I remember I was working with a survivor one time, and she would always use the word fight. She said, oh, well, we were fighting, and that's why I broke my arm. We were fighting it. And so we worked together for so long for her to get to the place where she was like, I was abused. Like, he hurt me. Right. Yes. And so when she tells her story now, she's like, and Lisa chipped away at that until I understood that I wasn't fighting. This was not an equal fight. I was being an equal fight. It wasn't equal. And so you really need that person to say, no, you're not going to go back. Not today. I know it hurts. I know it sucks, but you can keep going. And, I hear this all the time, Katie, and I'm sure that you do too, that they're just tired of fighting. They want to give up. They're not being heard in the court system. They don't have custody of their children. The abuser does. Katie, that happens so often.
I know. It's so often. I know, as a social worker, I deal with that all the time. All the time.
Really hard.
And I work with people who will just say to me, it's so much easier to just hope and pray that they stop. Like, each time something happens, they say, well, this has got to be it. I mean, this has got to be the worst. They'll take it. They got to get better from here. Like, no one would do.
And that's just not a true statement.
Yeah. And they just hope and pray that it'll stop.
Yep. Hey, from Ireland. Hey, Michelle. I'm sorry you said from Northern Ireland. She said the justice system is not good here either. And it's just really hard across the board. And, Katie, if Katie and I can walk up and make some changes in paper right now, we definitely would.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right. But since we can't, we do things like this. She's written her book. We advocate. We use our voices so people will know that change needs to take place. But in the meantime, we can't necessarily change the law right now, we can help empower and impact your life so you know what ways you can navigate the different systems of life. And I want to tell you, like I will always say over and over again, don't give up. You're worth fighting for. Your children are worth fighting for. Your freedom is worth fighting for. Hey, from New Zealand. She's in New Zealand. And
That's awesome.
Isn't it awesome? She said this is so different here. I haven't given up, but it's hard.
Yeah. And there's a couple people that I've seen pop up, and I don't want to call anyone up. There's a couple people have said that they're, the perpetrator is recording them. And I would consult someone for that. There are some states where that's illegal. And that can be, something that you could get support for.
And hey, from Amsterdam. Hey, Lena in Amsterdam. Glad you joined us. Tanya, yes, please go ahead and inbox us. We are all about trauma-informed therapists. We're working on a program with trauma-informed attorneys right now because you guys deserve that. You deserve to have therapists that are trauma-informed, specifically domestic violence trauma-informed, as sexual assault trauma-informed, as well as attorneys who represent you and support you in all walks of life that are also trauma-informed. So tell me, is there anything else you wanted to share? Anybody have any last-minute questions? We have like 3 more minutes left with Katie. I wanted to tell you about Document the Abuse and because and Victim's Voice are both resources for you to document the abuse that you're going through. Please scroll on our website, look up Victim's Voice as well as Document the Abuse. We'll come out for more of that later on this month, but those are 2 organizations that really do help you document the abuse. Document. If it's not written, it's like it didn't happen. So
yes,
make sure
absolutely.
you document it down.
And I always want to piggyback off that. I like to tell people, pick your battles, because there are sometimes I've seen it backfire where they go in and they've documented, everything that he did, while we went out to lunch with the children or whatever. it does look like it'll start to backfire. You'll look like the one who's picking on them.
Nitpicky. Right.
Pick your battles.
And make sure you're writing down things that are significant, like he was late to pick up the kids, or things that are really relevant, that are really going to be important in presenting your casing for it. So Katie, thank you so much. I failed to have her link here, but I will put it in the comments for where you can grab her book at PayPal. She's on special right now for tonight, $16.99. For those of you that are watching, you need to go ahead and grab the book. It's so good. And once you're done reading it, grab a copy for someone else or pass it on, because this needs to go to people who can actually. You are welcome. Hey, Pilar. Hey, my friends. All right, Katie, anything else you want to share with the people?
No, I would just say, like, that's definitely I think awareness is the biggest thing we as a society can do. Know the difference between when someone is just venting versus someone is smearing someone. Know the difference between venting and a smear campaign. Know the difference between, coincidences and stalking. Know the difference between someone who is a concerned partner versus someone who's out for revenge. Just start to notice those differences, because you can start to stop the cycle that you're starting to see.
That's good. And watch out for their flying monkeys, friends. I can't pick between my friends. I love both of you. Or they're coming and they're asking questions, finding out information about you. Watch out for those people too.
I always tell people, if there's anyone who says, I don't want to choose sides, that's fine. I always say, I respectfully understand that, and just back out. Don't try to explain your side. Don't try to convince them. Just be like, all right, I hope in the future sometime we can have a conversation. Wish you the best. Goodbye. Because, this is it's not a normal breakup. It's not a normal situation where you can have mutual friends. This could be life and death for some people if they know how to get it.
Absolutely. And I always say, and I'll say this: domestic violence is life or death. If it doesn't kill you physically, that's an opportunity, emotionally, psychologically, all of that. Domestic violence is deadly. So we can't play with the fact of, oh, well, they didn't really mean to, or no, domestic violence is life or death. And you don't deserve to live like that. You deserve to live a life that is filled with love and happiness and joy and peace. We're not saying perfection, right, Katie? But we're not, we're saying no abuse.
None of us are perfect, but when you start to hear they were just angry, and you start to hear the excuses, wish you all the best, but you have to protect yourself. Don't have mutual friends that you don't need to have, or mutual acquaintances.
All right, Katie, thank you so much. You're amazing. You guys grab this book. I'll put it up on the page tomorrow as well, and we will see you guys later. See ya.
Thanks, y'all.
Katie, hang out. Don't go anywhere.